Hi, students. Welcome to another episode of Women of FHSS. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from one of our former neuroscience students, Rhea Maynes. Rhea, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Rhea, as we get started, I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about yourself, where you are now, how you got to where you are, any details that you feel would be helpful for our students to know about you.
Sure. So I graduated from BYU's neuroscience program back in 2013. So it's been a little while, but not too long. And while I was there, I also minored in psychology. And so that perspective of study just kind of opened my view into the world in a new light. And instead of going to medical school, like a lot of other neuroscience grads might do, I actually went into finance and started building my career there. And over time have just really branched out into doing, I guess, following my passions and figuring out what they are. I mean, college is a great time to kind of explore, and I wish I did more of that while I was a student. But after graduating and just through a lot of opportunities and networking, I've been able to just kind of follow what becomes a greater area of interest for me. And so now I'm currently living in Draper, Utah. My husband and we've spent time back out east. I grew up in Orlando, so I love the East Coast. But we were in the Boston area for a while and loved it there. We're looking at maybe going back to New York City. But we're in Draper right now, and we were living in Cairo last year.
Wow.
With COVID, it just kind of gave us an opportunity to work remote and do things remote, and then also kind of follow my husband's passion. And so it's been I feel like COVID's been an interesting time for everyone. And I really hope that everybody's finding ways to capitalize on the way the world is changing. Anyway, so I'm here. I thought I have some fun things to share just about my journey and how I got to where I am now. And then also just to stay connected with everybody at BYU. So
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. The first thing that comes to my mind as you're talking is neuroscience to finance, right? Like that's not typically something that you hear, right? And also that you've been able to dive into different areas in your partnership with your husband to follow different dreams at different times. And so I'm curious if maybe the first thing that you can help us understand is how did that happen? Neuroscience to finance. What was that pathway like? Was it natural? Did you go seeking it? Tell us a little bit about that.
Not completely natural. So when I was about a junior, I realized before my junior year, that summer, I spent time in Peru doing medical work. And when I came back, I was like, I like medicine, but I don't think I want to do this whole path to becoming a physician. My best friend, she's doing it. We're the same age, and she's finally finishing up her residency, and she's specializing. And you hit 30 and then you're finally doing it. And that's not exactly what I wanted for my full life trajectory. I didn't want to be that's just not what I wanted. I pictured for myself. So I went and talked to the head of the neuroscience department. I set up a meeting with him and just talked to him like, hey, I see this is what a lot of students do. I don't think this is what I want to do, but I love what I'm studying. What else have you seen? And so he kind of gave me some thoughts about hot topics. And what's really great about neuroscience right now is recently there have been in the last 5 to 10 years, you've had 2 Nobel Prize winners in economics that were psychologists and neuroscientists. And so Richard Thaler, he is one, and then Daniel Kahneman, and he's very, very world famous now at this point. But Daniel Kahneman wrote a book that also was on the New York Times bestseller list called Thinking Fast and Slow. And he talks about his experience with studying psychology and neuroscience and how it led to understanding markets in the economy. And so this whole field is emerging called behavioral finance. And my the department head kind of knew about it and like talked to me about it. And I kind of dived into it a little bit more and found it interesting. And as I started doing that, then you start to see how what you're studying can apply to so many different areas and fields. And and I know a lot of women are probably wondering like this question, like, well, if I study history or I study psychology, like, or whatever, and how do I apply for jobs like that aren't really like in that field? And as someone that's been interviewing people and I've been in your shoes myself, employers are looking for smart people. And so if you can show them that you're smart, they will give you a chance. And so I found something I was interested in. I, through some networking, interviewed at a couple different places and landed a job where I spent like several years and really built and launched my, I guess my, what you could say, my career path in. And, you know, they're like, you seem like a smart person. and you have a legitimate interest in what we do. So they gave me a shot. And you know, you once you get in, you prove yourself and you prove yourself again and again, and you make friends and it becomes a great place.
That's amazing. And listening to it, it sounds so easy, but I'm sure in the middle of it,
super stressful.
Yeah,
oh
so
my goodness,
stressful.
so
Yes.
stressful. And like I wish that I had the self-confidence that I have today back then, because you know, in the back of your head all the time you're like, I'm not qualified. I feel like that was the most common voice in my head, is like, I'm not good enough, I'm not qualified. And my grades were good, they were very good. And I knew what I was talking about, and I studied and I brushed up in the field. I did my reading. and I feel like that's just a very common thing, even when I help mentor other students or people that are early in their careers. I remind them that if you believe that you can do the job, then you just have to convince your interviewer that you can do the job too. But yes, stressful. The whole experience can be very stressful. It helps to have somebody that's your cheerleader, whether that's your mom or your spouse or your dog. Anything helps.
I think that's so great for our students to understand, because we try really hard at the university to outline, here are the skills that you're gaining as a result of your coursework. And some of them are more technical in nature and some of them are not, right? Like, how do you quantify that I'm a good team player? Or how do you quantify that I'm a good collaborator or a leader? You know, what does that look like? And so I appreciate that you said, really, companies are hiring you because you can do this and you can learn these things, whether or not it's on the job training or whether or not they ask you to do more coursework. And so I guess my follow-up question is, what are some things that you wish, you know, you could tell that post-graduation self that was seeking a job, you know, other than you have told us about, you know, imposter syndrome and like taking that to the floor. But aside from that, what would you say to some of our students who are grappling with that right now? Like, oh my gosh, how is this qualifying you for something?
I would say, think about what it is that you've already learned how to do. And this is something that you can just sit at the computer, you know, if it's summertime for you, you're in a break or whatever, sit at the computer, think about the things that you've learned in your classes and like write down the skill set generally. If it's like group work, if it's learning how to do things in a specific type of software system, or different skills that you are learning just in your different courses. So list the skills that you've acquired over the time you've been a student. And then if you know what it is that you want to do, look at your skill set list and align it with what it is that you want to do. And you'll start to see that you probably have a lot of those basic skills, especially for entry-level positions into like the workforce. And if there are skills that aren't on your list that you feel like you need, you can do them. Because if you look at the list of skills you have, you've done a lot already, and you could do more. And you can do whatever it is you need to do. And if you just keep remembering that I have all these skills that I've learned over the last few years, and there's a few more that I need to get to where I want to be, I can do it. It's just a few more. And sometimes, you end up having to take like baby steps to get to where you need to go. But if you really know where you want to go, the drive is there. And if you don't know where you want to go, which I feel like that's probably most of us don't know where we want to go, then you've got your list of skills that you know how to do, and you can probably figure it out as you go, which is kind of where I'd say I was. It's like I kind of didn't know what I want to do, found something of interest, and then I just went with it. And as you go with it, you build more skills, and you find that you can discover like more of your interests, and you can just keep moving forward and forward and forward with that.
I love that. And I want to come back to that, but there was something else that you said that reminded me of an article I just read, and it's not a new phenomenon. It's not new data, but that women are more reluctant to apply for jobs that they feel that they're not qualified for, at least 90% of the qualifications, right? And what I'm hearing is you don't have to be 90% qualified. In fact, we find that men may only be 60% qualified, but they're applying for these same jobs and they're getting them. And so there is something to be said about acknowledging that if you don't have those skills, apply for the job anyway. Don't make a pre-decision based on this list that you're putting together that you're not qualified for something.
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up and like just spelled it out, because it is the 100% truth. When I was working on Wall Street, I went to a couple different lecture series in New York City, where they have like these really prestigious women that are like CEOs or COOs and CMOs of companies. They just get to come and you get to listen to them talk about a bunch of different stuff. And one of the most impactful things for me at that time, and I was probably maybe like 3 years into my career, and was talking exactly about this. About, like, we're like, well, how did you get to where you are? Like, what did you realize? What advice do you want to give? And she talked about how women, we undervalue ourselves. And she explained sometimes a lot of it has to do just with our nature. And we have to break out of those comfort zones. And I read a book by Sheryl Sandberg. She was the COO of Facebook. She wrote a book called Lean In, where she talks about just kind of, and part of it, she talks about this as well, where we just need to get outside of our comfort zone. If you just sit up straight in the chair, and instead of like leaning forward or hunched back, if you just sit up straight and show presence and you speak with confidence, that gets you further. And yes, when it comes to applying for jobs, we look at the list of qualifications and think we have to meet all of them, because I was there thinking I had to meet all of these qualifications. And I'll admit, like, my first job at like a big Wall Street firm, I got because I had networked, and a friend of mine was going on maternity leave, and she recommended me to her boss. And so I went through the whole interview process, and her boss was comfortable, was like, hey, she's recommending this person. I don't even remember looking at all the qualification lists. And I'm terrified that if I had, I probably would have second guessed, am I the right person for this role? And I was. And whether or not I met all the qualification listings, I was still the right person for the role, and I could still do the job. And so in a roundabout way that I'm talking around in circles, don't worry about if you don't meet all the qualifications. If you can get through like 60, like slightly more than half, then you're good. Apply, just apply.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I think that there is somebody out there listening to this right now that could really, really use that advice. Just apply.
Just apply. And then you will learn what you need to learn. So remember, if you've got a majority of the skill set, you can learn what you need to learn to do your role. And a lot of what you learn, especially in entry-level positions or lower level ones, they teach you. I had months and months of training. So like just to start my jobs. And then the company I worked for even paid for like formal training, because I'd have like licensing to be an investment advisor and broker dealer. And I had to pass exams to do that. And they provide all of it. So just apply. If it's something you want to do, show up, sit up tall. and when they ask you like, well, can you do this? And you can't, you say, I'm willing and ready to learn.
I think that's the ticket, right? Is the willingness to learn, because I'm sure even in what you're doing now, you're still learning different things, whether or not it's a new way to do something or navigating a collaborative enterprise, or, just in conflict resolution. Like, you're always in a space of learning. And when you can show that, that's really attractive to employers. So
yes. Oh, absolutely. Because usually the person that meets all the qualifications, is just coming from someone that's gone through like hiring other people. When they meet all the qualifications, sometimes they're overqualified. And so I might not exactly want someone that meets all the qualifications, because they're not going to want to stay in this role for very long. So there's a lot.
Bored. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that employers are considering that as a new like hire, as someone that's applying for their first like professional job or two, you might not recognize. So just have the confidence, apply.
Good. So good. You've mentioned this a couple of times in your previous response, and also in this response that you just gave now, about the value of networking. I wanted to talk about, the relationship component of networking. How important is it in helping somebody progress in their career, or even just, I don't know, even as an undergraduate looking into careers? And then did you obtain this skill? So I think it's a skill of networking in an earlier position or while you were an undergraduate. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
So I'll start with the last question first. Like, where does the networking come from? For starters, it starts like learning how to network begins when you learn how to make friends. We start that in like kindergarten, first grade. You kind of read the room and you figure out where you get along with people and similar interests. I think networking when you're in college is really, really critical. And it can become more critical as you go higher up in your education. So when you're in your undergrad, I highly recommend getting to know other students in your major, because you guys are all going to be entering the workforce all over the country, and you can support each other. And if you end up wanting to change jobs, or you're wanting to expand or learn something new, you have someone you can call. And vice versa, where if you know that you're hiring somebody new, or like you have an open position or you need advice, you have other people you can call that are in your similar field. So networking really, like in college, it's a great time to really start, just to get to know people. You don't have to be best friends with them. I like worried that when I think about like, oh, I got to get to know all these people, it's, no, you're not trying to like increase the number of followers on your Instagram account. That's not the objective. The best connections I found professionally are going to come from just associations. So you're going to call like and recommend someone, even when they're not your best friend. It most likely happens when you just kind of know someone. And it's really amazing how it works that way, but that's how networking works, is you just kind of know someone and you just got to have the guts to give them a call. And when you're in the workforce, that's when it really, you just build the skill over time. It is a skill. And it was one I was uncomfortable with. I'm not an introvert. I'm definitely an extrovert. So I feel for my introvert sisters out there that this networking is just like painfully hard. But like just talking to people and feeling like I'm trying to get something out of them kind of feels dirty sometimes. And that's not the complete objective, because they could be calling you and wanting to have you do them a favor one day, just with these loose connections. So it's a skill that builds over time, kind of like making friends, kind of becomes a skill. It could be really awkward to just like, oh, that person looks so cool, I want to talk to them, but I don't have anything to say, so there's lots of different ways that you can get experience and exposure to networking, but it definitely starts now while you're a student, and it will become more critical for helping you find just job opportunities, or even exploring your own interests. And so that kind of leads back to how I feel about networking. You could probably hear me say I'm thinking it's critical. It helped me land a majority of my jobs that I've had, and it also helped me learn what was out there. I remember like getting on like some job posting website can kind of feel overwhelming, and I know we're talking a lot about careers here, building careers, but if you are networking and you're talking and meeting around new people, whether it's through church or your family and your family's friends, or your roommate's sibling or your roommate's parents, all of them are part of your network. And all of those different connections can help you find the job you want, can help you find the volunteering opportunity you want, or even just to explore an area of interest. When I was thinking about going to medical school and kind of deciding against that, there were two main things that I did. One was I went overseas to Peru and spent the summer there, and had a lot of hands-on experience with doing like immunizations, stitches, all this stuff. And then also while I was here, one of my boyfriend's friends was married, and his wife was a physician. She was already like working in a family practice. And so just through that connection, I talked to her, and she was like, oh my goodness, come in and shadow me for a week. And so I went to work with her from like 1 to 3, and I would just hang out with her. I would be in there when she would meet her, like go in with patients. She would ask the patient, hey, we have someone who's like studying, mind if they're in the room? And they usually say yes. And so it was a family practice. So I got to see what it was like to treat adults and children. And at the end of the week, I was like, this is really boring. I don't think I could do this. And so, so just combining like all of these different experiences that I've had with watching professionals do their thing, and then also, I guess, getting some hands-on experience, I realized that this wasn't really for me. But if I hadn't just used my circle of connections, I might have missed that opportunity, and I could have been in medical school doing something I didn't want to do, and which would have eventually led me to something else. Like I try to think positive about that. But in general, use the connections that you have, whether they're or not they're strong connections, because it's those loose connections that are going to have a larger, I guess, branch, or have more branches for you to reach out to and try things. And through even just talking to her and spending all that time with her, she can introduce me to more people. And when I realized this isn't what I wanted to do, she's like, oh, well, I had one of these friends in medical school that didn't like doing medicine and is now doing this. You want to give them a call? And so there's just a lot of different ways that like it ends up progressing naturally for you. So don't be overwhelmed by just like this icky feeling, because I know I had an icky feeling with networking, thinking that I'm using people, and you're not using people, you're connecting with people. And for my introverted friends,
Yes.
you've got to just start maybe with family friends and just get comfortable with it.
I have loved everything that you've said, because it's things that we encourage in our advising office, right? Our students to be doing. I love that you're a living example of what networking can be. I mean, here you started in a degree that really you wouldn't think had a lot of ties to the financial community, but through the conversations that you had with people that you knew, you were able to figure some things out that were really critical for where you are. Just
Yes.
because you opened your mouth and you were talking about, well, I don't really know how this is going to fit into this, or how I fit in, because nothing is in a box, right? And I think that sometimes as students, our students feel overwhelmed that it has to look a certain way, but it's not until you start opening your mouth with where you are. And I love that you did a shout out to our introverts, because I'm a very extroverted person too. And I'm like, oh, just cold call people that you don't even know and it'll be fine. And my introverted friends are like, oh my gosh, you just asked me to commit a felony, right? And so I like that you gave this shout out and permission. Just start where you are comfortable. Yes. And that it will lend to the personality that you have, the characteristics that you have, the strengths that you have. So I really thank you so much for talking about that.
And can I add one more thing? As you're speaking, I'm remembering, like, for those that are new to this or might be a little uncomfortable, lean into the areas that you're already have a ground, like a foothold. So if it's like if you're really active at church and that's like one of your favorite spaces, keep going. Or if you're in some club that, I don't know what kind of club, but if you're in a club, keep going. You know, if there's different areas of interest, keep going to those places. Because I know for me, by doing the things that I enjoy doing and connecting with people with similar interests that I have, I've been able to make more connections. And I've had people call me and ask me to help them with things. So they're doing the networking on the other end. And it's led to like really amazing opportunities. And like I recently spoke at BYU's Women's Conference this year, and that came about by someone calling me that loosely knew me from someone else and said they heard me at this thing and they're like, oh my goodness, can we have a chat? And then it grew into, are you able to speak at Women's Conference? And from that, I met more women and with other interests, and then we can find unique ways to continue this whole networking. So networking might start small, and that's okay. It's just it grows and it grows and it grows. Your network of people grow. So
love it. Thank you so much. Well, I wanted to kind of take us a different direction. I was wondering if you could talk with us, very real, about the things that you've had to grapple with, both personally and professionally, at each stage in your career. Are there things that were completely unanticipated? Were there things maybe in the partnership that you have with your husband and his career goals?
Yes, absolutely. And let me think of where to begin. So starting out, I had to grapple with the fact that I was spending a lot of hours working. Because again, it could be that I just came from a field that didn't, like, I came from a background of study where it wasn't as relevant to what I was doing day to day. And I had to get qualified for things and study a little bit more than probably my coworkers, which is okay. But we were all working lots and lots of hours and putting in the time is kind of how we think about it. And I had a spouse that was very supportive of that. And so, because he was also doing something very similar, so he's putting in time. So recognizing that there's a time and phase for everything, and being willing to submit to that. But once that time and phase you've had enough of it, recognizing that, like within yourself, that you're ready for the next thing, that's something you have to grapple with as well, is when do I take the next step? And it really helps to have a mentor guide you, someone that might understand what timelines look like, so you're not trying to run faster than you should. Or if there's something that you're missing, maybe another skill set you still need to build before you take the next step, having a mentor is super key with helping you know when the right time is, and also to help you cultivate those skills. And then I think one of the biggest things you have to grapple with as women, unfortunately, it's as women, is when to have children and be a professional. I remember, and this is a part of me that regrets it. I'm happy where I'm at in life today, but I remember telling myself that, okay, once I have this title and we were living in Boston and we were able to like find the like perfect 2-bedroom apartment, then we could talk about having kids. And I got the title. We moved into a new, bigger apartment, and I still was not ready to take the step back from work or to move into the right area at work in order to have kids or to talk about it with my boss. And so there are just different stages in life where we want to be, and we have to make work for us. And being comfortable enough to speak up when there's something that we want. And that can be really, really challenging. So I think as you're grappling with different things, I think everybody will have different issues or struggles early on in their careers. Having a mentor to help guide you and to help you know when to have a conversation and how to have that conversation is really critical. Because I've definitely have had a couple of things that were a little hard to deal with. And then the last thing that was not hard to grapple with, but I had to, was being mindful of my workplace reputation. So I don't think a lot of people recognize how valuable your reputation is. Or like when people are in a room and they're talking about, they're talking about opportunities and thinking of who's the right person for this opportunity, or even just as a student, your professors are thinking about who do I want to be the TA for next semester? Like, I want to approach one of my students. They're going to think about, like, of course, who meets like their basic criteria, but they're going to think about characteristic traits. And so maintaining a reputation in public versus private, and sometimes those gel well together, where your private personality works in your public space, but sometimes it's not always as welcomed. And I'm not saying you have to like bottle up your whole self. It's just you share parts of yourself in different areas of your life. And hopefully in your private life, we're able to, you have family, friends, and neighbors that love your whole self, and you can share your whole self there. And with your coworkers, you can share your whole self there too. But when you think about just opportunities, you don't want to be listed as the negative Nancy, or that's always complaining, to your boss, or someone that doesn't turn things in on time. And these are all, I think, skills that you can learn as a student, just being in your classroom with your professors. I mean, when there's somebody in the classroom that's always complaining or making some snarky comment or trying to be the devil's advocate all the time. And that's just the part of them that's being showed in those circumstances. It's not all of who they are. So being mindful of what part of me is being represented in this small area of my life.
That's a very interesting one. Admittedly, we think about it, right? But for you to articulate it that way has been really great. Are you coming and approaching that from a personal experience that you wouldn't mind sharing? Or have you known somebody who hasn't maybe sought that advice that you can kind of give an example of?
I've had I've had experiences where my character is just judged based on the way I look. So I'm an African American female, and I have people that have made assumptions about me, not knowing me, just based on the way I look or where my family is from. I have a Southern family with deep Southern roots in Louisiana, and I have family members with like thicker accents that maybe sound less educated, but I have an aunt who sounds really, really, she doesn't speak English so well, but she has a PhD. She's a smart lady. But people make assumptions about her just based on the way she speaks or the way, some people look. Anyway, so just from that experience, I have to be cognizant of what people might be thinking about me. And it's unfortunate that that's the world that we live in. But if you understand that, then I can think about, okay, well, what vibes do I want to give out about myself in my environments? And what positive things do I want people to always associate with me? I'm rarely ever considered a liar. Nobody so when I speak the truth, and everyone I've worked with always values my integrity and honesty. So when we have hard conversations about things, they know it's coming from an honest and sincere place, and I'm not making stuff up. And when I'm a very hard worker, and I think I've over pushed that image of myself because people have made assumptions about me potentially being lazy just based off of the way I look, or being disadvantaged in some way, or knowing less about a subject. And so I try to make sure I'm articulate. And so these are just, I hope this is making some sense. But I know some of us have things that we come with that we can't control. It could be our past that follows us around. It could be our culture or our race. It could be a physical disability, or it could be just our faith. Like I think many people can relate at BYU to having, non-members of the LDS church think certain things of members or make assumptions about, oh, well, you're not a drinker. That one comes up like every now and then. It's like, how do you get through your days without drinking coffee? Can I count on you to do this? Are you going to be sleepy in the afternoon? Those are silly things people might make assumptions about, but if you're aware of what you want your image to be, you can combat that, and then it's not an issue at all.
Yeah. And thank you for being so willing to open up about that, because I know that it's a topic that is very hot right now, and depending on the approach of the conversation can lead people to feel certain ways about something that is very real. And so I appreciate you being vulnerable to that and being open about these things that you've really had to think about and adjust to. And it's a sad world in which we're in a space, whether or not it's culturally or, gender or faith, where we feel that we have to be on guard. And sometimes it can be really exhausting to be on guard in some of these different spaces. But you've been so willing to share what you've needed to do in order to combat maybe some of these social prejudices or systemic issues that do exist.
Yeah, and I think one that a lot of your listeners can maybe thinking about is the whole, I'm a female and I want to have children in the work and have children and work. Because I have a lot of friends that are in this situation where they want to have, or one very relevant one, my neighbor, she's amazing. She just had her third kid and she's a full-time teacher. And when she was having her third, she was pregnant with her third, the students' parents just all assumed she was going to stay at home. Mm-hmm. And she's like, no, I love teaching. And my husband, I have a supportive spouse, and we have a system that works for us. And so I'm going to be back next year. And so there's just assumptions that are made. And it's not that people are intentionally being harmful, because I don't think anyone that was judging my friend for wanting to be home with her kids is like being wrong. It's just not what she wanted, or it's not what she was wanting of herself, or what she wanted other people to view her as. And so, and then there's like my case where right now I'm actually taking a step back. I'm not in a formal workplace anymore. I just do things on a contract basis because I want to be home with my little boy. And I'm having another this summer, and I want to be home with them, and I want to participate in some professional things, but not on a full-time level. And so, as women, I think we all just need to support each other with whatever we decide to do, but then also recognize that as we're making these decisions and trying to grapple with these challenges that show up in the workplace, that this is one that many of us can relate to. And if you have see someone more senior that has kids, go talk to them and ask them, how did they have that conversation? When did they have that conversation? And what did they do once they were pregnant, once they had the baby, once their kids were 3-year-olds, or did they step back from work and then go back to work? I mean, there's just so many assumptions made about women in the workplace that might not meet your preference or your lifestyle. And so I think that's at least one area I know a lot of us can relate to, at least thinking about in the future.
Yeah, I love that. And that goes to a question. I feel like we've answered it, so I'm not going to ask it verbatim, but this idea of finding mentors in your life who have perspectives on different things that you're really truly trying to understand, and their experiences being able to help you process through what will work for you in your situation, in your family, in your circumstance, in your background, I think is so crucial. So I'm glad you touched on that again.
And the best way to find a mentor is, in my opinion, is just to let it naturally happen. Maybe just through your efforts in networking, you might see someone, it could be your boss, or it could be your best friend's mom or dad or whomever. It could be someone in your closer sphere that you can call and get advice from in a specific subject matter. But I definitely feel like the longest lasting and the most beneficial mentors in my life have been ones that have evolved naturally. And when we were talking about all this, like women in the workplace, I've had the issue when I was having my son, where my boss at the time was very judgmental about what it will look like for me in the workplace with having a kid at home, and was very negative. And I had to deal with a lot of this negativity around being a working mom that I was getting from my boss. And I had to call. So at that time, what I ended up doing was calling one of my mentors from my previous job. And I asked her about it, and she gave me some really, really great advice. And as things evolved, I would check in with her, or she would just send me a text and ask, how are things going? And because she has 3 kids, she's very successful. And she knows that sometimes people don't understand that women can do things we set our minds to. And I just happen to have a boss that didn't understand. And she helped me navigate that environment. And so having her as a mentor that I could just call when I needed her for advice was really, really beneficial for helping me realize that I can do what I want. And then I ended up over time deciding to be at home, and that's okay.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. I'm so glad that you had that relationship with somebody to ask really, really what seems at the time just questions that are pulling your soul different places and pulling your spirit different places. And so having somebody there that can help ground you, because you're capable and smart, right, of making these choices, but in the moment it doesn't feel that way. And that imposter syndrome is so real and keeps kicking in. So having that person that's like, no, let's step back to who you are, because I know that's who you are. And let me share the things that I've gleaned in my experience as well. And you'll be able to make something work out for you that will come out, as you're communicating with these individuals who have these certain judgments. You'll be able to figure things out that will work for you and your character and your personality and the strengths that you bring. So that's really great. Just kind of wrapping up, and I know we didn't hit all the questions. I could probably talk to you all day. This has been so great. And
I'm a rambler, so this is probably just not the best from me either.
Oh, are you kidding me? I think this is perfect. It's actually perfect for what I think our students need to hear, what I need to hear personally as well. So this is kind of self-serving. But is there anything else, Ray, that you think would be helpful for our women students, empowering to them as they pursue whatever it is that they have in their life post-graduation, whether or not it's fulfilling grad school, staying at home, part-time or full-time employment opportunities?
I think what I wish someone had told me while I was a student, and I can't say I wasn't told this, but I didn't take it seriously, was to really, really like do some introspection and think about what it is that you want in the next 5 or 10 years, and then work towards that. So if you are someone that really wants to get a PhD and you found like some subject matter that you're really interested in and you want to follow that, pursue it. And then as life happens or as you face challenges or obstacles, you know what your goal is in mind and you can make it work for you. Like you can make your circumstances and your situations work towards your goals still. So but if you're someone that you don't really know what you want, you're probably going to coast a little bit, and that's okay too. Just know that as you're like making decisions, that you understand your character and what you're wanting out of your decisions. Are your decisions getting you closer to finding more fulfillment and happiness? And because I really believe that as we make decisions, whether we can see the future or not, it's really important that we're trying to make decisions that we feel good about. And so if that's going to be grad school for you, pursue it. If it's going to be like having 5 babies and being at home, pursue that too. But whatever it is you choose to do, make sure your relationships support that. I couldn't emphasize that enough. My mom is super successful in her career, like super successful. And I think she was able to reach that success because my dad was her cheerleader throughout her career. And I've been fortunate enough to find someone to marry that is very supportive of whatever it is I choose to do. And so whatever it is you choose to do, make sure you have a good support system and make it work for you. So if you want to go to grad school, go to grad school. If you're single and it's working for you, keep going. If you're not single, talk to your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whomever, I don't know, but just make sure you know what you want, communicate that with the people that love you. And work towards those goals.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ray, for your time and for your energy and for everything that you've been through in your life that you can relate to some of our students that might be struggling with some of these decisions, because it is scary. It's a very scary place to be, having kind of the world in front of you, but also feeling like your life has to look a certain way. I think this conversation has really helped me gain an appreciation for all the different things that women in the gospel and women of ambition face when it comes to certain decisions in their life. And so I really appreciate the insight that you have. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's good for me to kind of think back and remind myself, because we all need to remind ourselves sometimes that we're working towards our goals and we're striving for things to make us happy and fulfilled. And so I hope you find it. I hope everybody that's listening is able to just apply for the job. Just do it. It's okay. The stress is going to end one day. I promise.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, bye.